Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today's card is this cute Lavinia stamped card. This is on a floral theme, so I've used some of the beautiful Lavinia flower stems and I've coloured them all in different colours, so pinks and oranges and yellows, purples, and then I've used stickles on the top to get this wonderful glittery effect which you can see on all the flowers, and I've stamped the lone fairy or sprite just walking in the hills. I've used torn paper and inked just to create some in effect ground, and then I've used lots of different little hang down things that I've coloured in green and purple, and this is on a background that I created using a couple of different colours distress ink by smushing. If you want to see how I created this card, stay tuned. Okay, let's get started. So I've sped this up slightly because it's quite long-winded. I've got a piece of watercolour cardstock and two different distress oxides. We're going to do a bit of smushing, so I've got my distress sprayer, and basically I'm doing this on a glass mat. It just makes it slightly easier and less messy. So I'm laying down some ink and then I'm just dotting and dabbing with my cardstock just to get some ink on there. This is quite a light colour, so you can see it doesn't make much of an impression, but I just want to give an overall background. Don't worry about lines and things like that. Of course, the important thing with distress oxides, if you're smushing like this, is drying between the layers. Otherwise it all melds together and you get a big brown fudgy mess. So important to dry between the layers, and then that way you get lots of variation and you get the edges of the ink on the page, which is the effect that we want. So there you go, you can see I'm adding some more and adding a bit of water as well when it gets a bit dry to kind of just give it that texture. This is why it's important to use quite a heavy cardstock. This is a 300 GM stock, which is £140 for people in the US. So it's quite a thick paper and you definitely need that when you're doing this technique. So I'm drying that front and back. I've done my blue layer. I'm going to do my green layer now. This is very much a background of our card, so we don't want it to be too prominent, which is why I've picked relatively light colours. The bundled sage is a quite dark green, but I'm going to quite water that down. You can see for this one, I'm also just dabbing it a little bit with my fingers just to kind of spread it out. I only want the green really at the bottom of the page. We're kind of creating almost like a sky and a grass. So I kind of just wanted green at the bottom and blue at the top. Obviously, we're going to add to that with some ink along the way. So there you go. I'm just adding a bit more blue, a bit more of the green over the blue, and obviously because they're distress oxides, they will sit comfortably on one another. They have that lovely chalky texture, and it just creates quite a nice effect. Giving that a proper dry, and then obviously I'm cleaning my glass mat. Now, at this point, the cardstock is quite warped, you can see, so I'm just giving that a bend back, and again, this is why it's important to have a decent quality cardstock. So I'm putting this in my stamping platform. I usually do this when I'm stamping, just because it gives you the chance to redo. I'm using this Lavinia Stamps Fairy, one of their beautiful selection of fairies, and I'm just going to stamp her in the middle of the project. Now, obviously we're going to be putting stuff around her, but that's what I'm going to demonstrate with the masking fluid for those who are not familiar with using that. So I position it, make sure it's in the right place, then I get my little anti-static bag out and I just go over what we've just created because it's got grease on it, it could be slightly damp still. I'm using a VersaFine Black, which is your sort of most common, most popular ink, to just stamp her over, and we want to make sure we get a really good bold impression, so probably a couple of inkings on this. Because the paper's been wet, it will drink the ink up, so it's important to stamp it a couple of times, which is why the platform is essential. There you go, you can see, look how fuzzy she is in the middle, and again we just stamp her again, make sure we give that an absolute good press, give it a time to rest on the paper as well so that the ink transfers, and there you go, you can see we've now got a good impression. So I would typically then just give her a gloss effect finish by using some clear emboss powder, and then obviously dry that off. Now that sort of heat sets the black, it gives it a kind of a glossy effect which makes her stand out a little bit against that chalky background. But more importantly on this card, because we're going to be doing other stuff around her, it's quite good to emboss that and heat set it. It fixes her in place. We're going to be painting masking fluid over her, so it's quite good to emboss. I'm just going to clean her up. These are beautiful stamps from Lavinia. Obviously they do a hell of a lot of fairies and kind of natural plants and flowers and all sorts of cute stuff. So let's put her back in her packet. There we go. So we've now got our fairy on our background. Now, I mean, it looks quite cute as it is. It's going to have a lot more elements on it once we start adding flowers and things. Now, at this point, I'm just having a look at how the flowers are going to work out, because I need to know roughly where to mark out with my masking fluid. So that was me just having a rough size up. Now the masking fluid is quite interesting. This is a liquid you paint on top, and it dries into an almost plasticky finish, and then you can ink over, you can stamp over, you can paint over, you can spray over. Um, and basically it protects what's underneath. It creates almost like not a hard shell, a soft shell, put it like that, that protects whatever's underneath. So if you stamp and then you cover with masking fluid, you can then work over it to create a background, create stuff around it, etc. When you've finished, you can then peel off the masking fluid to reveal what was underneath. If you're colouring, it's quite a good idea to stamp the outline, mask, create around it, peel off, then colour. Because sometimes when you do the masking fluid, it can occasionally peel off the thing underneath. So it would be awful to get, go through all the trouble of colouring something, then painting over it, creating the rest of the card around it, then you peel off and discover it's ruined at the last moment. So bear that in mind when using. So you can see I'm just going over with the masking fluid. You don't need loads. Or you do a couple of layers. I pour that back in to the pot at the end. And there we go. This is now a bit dried and a bit later. So you can see it kind of dries. Sorry, I'm just adjusting the camera there. It dries and it leaves you with a kind of a yellow effect around it. But basically that's now ready to then carry on. So I'm getting my floral stamp, which is a kind of a tall floral thing, and the first thing I'm going to do is stamp over the top of the image. But because I've put the masking fluid on, obviously that's not going to stamp actually directly on top of the image. It will stamp around it. And you can see I'm doing an off stamp as well. So I'm stamping once, which is a nice bold black, and then I'm also stamping again, which is a lighter effect. That kind of gives us the depth we want, with some images in the foreground, some in the background, sort of greyed out as they recede away from you. I'm not going to do loads. This is all I want. And I'm just going to dry this. I'm not going to heat emboss this because I've got the masking fluid on. I don't want to be adding any more embossing powder on, because that could then in effect set the masking fluid. So at this point for these ones, I'm just going to leave them. Now when I colour, a little bit of that black will go into the colour, but that's not a problem. So the first thing I did there was foolishly, I went to try and take the masking fluid off, forgetting that I just stamped over the top of it, and I made a dirty mark, which I'm going to rub out and I can get rid of. There we go. Kitchen towel on top. Give it a good rub over first. That will take any of the worst of the ink off it. Then use kitchen towel to kind of rub the masking fluid off. You can see it peels off almost like a skin, and you get like a little piece of rubber left at the end of it. But the effect is interesting. You can see the stamping is now kind of around it and not over it, not right on top of it. So that's the effect we wanted, really, a fairy kind of walking amongst flowers. I'm going to use my Pro markers to colour here, so I'm picking out a few kind of primary bright colours. These are flowers, so I want kind of floral colours, and I'm just going with the 4. So I've got a yellow, a pink, an orange and a blue. And you can see I just start colouring basically. Apologies, the focus is going to struggle while I'm doing this, but you can see I'm just picking out from those flowers and colouring in a random pattern, different flowers, different yellows. Well, the same yellow in different places basically. So the idea of this was a kind of a floral themed card. And obviously, because I haven't heat embossed, a little bit of the black will fade into the yellow, but I thought that's okay, it's kind of interesting and it all looks part of the overall effect. So I'm picking a load of colours to colour in, or a load of flowers, sorry, to colour in with the yellow. I wanted the yellow to be the most sort of repeated colour. So that's my yellow. I'm then going to go in with the purple. Obviously that's darker, hence slightly less. But again, it shows up really nicely against that blue background we created with the Distress Oxides. So again, going in with the purple, and I'm just colouring in really simply, not taking too much time, quite guerrilla card making here, not messing around too much, just going straight for it. Pro markers are interesting. Obviously they're alcohol based, so they do give you a nice vivid bright colour, and they're good for colouring, and you can blend with them, but I must admit I tend to favour my Arteza watercolour pens these days for blending. There we go. So when I get to her, because I've left a kind of a slight line around her, I am kind of leaving a little bit of a border. I want her to kind of have a bit of an aura around her. So I've not coloured right up to her in those that are immediately behind her. And similarly, when I painted the masking fluid, I didn't paint it specifically just on every bit of her. I kind of went over the edges so that I had that effect around her. There we go. That's our light pink, and then orange is the last colour. So just 4 different colours. As I said, I don't want it to be too messy, don't want it to be too mixed. And I'm just literally colouring. Doesn't take long, quite relaxing. I actually really enjoy colouring. It's one of my favourite bits of card making. And it doesn't take too long at all. Obviously I've sped it up just so that you're not sitting there watching me do it in real time, but I think it took me about 40 minutes overall, the whole card. It's starting to look nice. You can see with these Lavinia stamps you can kind of build up the layers, and they look great. There we go. I think that's the majority of our flowers coloured. I think it's all of the flowers coloured actually. And now at this point I thought, right, what am I going to do with the stems of the flowers? Because they're quite narrow, I thought I'm going to do these with a pencil. So I literally got a pencil and just went up the stems just to green them up a little bit. And at the top they get quite thin. I didn't bother to do anything there. I only did it on the bits that were slightly thicker. And this is quite obviously easier with a pencil because it's quite a sharp point, slightly easier to control. I will ground the stems with some kind of green inking, but I certainly didn't blend them into the ground. I've left it kind of structural, so I've left it quite just a flower on a green background, not with a heap of earth around it or anything like that. I wasn't going for realism here, I was going for structural. So there we go, that's pretty much our green stems. Look how pretty that is, it's quite nice already. We need to add a bit more in, so we'll add some stuff at the top and at the bottom. At the bottom, we're going to add some kind of torn edge landscaping in, and at the top we'll add some dangly stuff. Now at this point I get my ink eraser, and you can see I quite easily get rid of that inky mark. It's not too bad, as long as you're careful and you don't go too hard. When I use my ink eraser, I always then go over it with the normal eraser afterwards, and that the combination of both seems to work quite well. So there you go, and that took that off quite nicely, which was good. That's not really visible now. But as I said, we're going to do some stamping at the top anyway. Lavinia do these really lovely stamps that are like things hanging down with a little heart on the end, or a flower, almost like a little trumpet. So I decided to do that. Now at the top, before we do that, we're going to add a little bit more blue. It was looking a little bit pale. So you can see I've got the same Distress Oxide, and I'm just going to go over that with a stencil brush. So I'm just adding just a little bit more blue before I add those top elements. Just doing this very gently with a stencil brush, being careful not to tear the paper obviously. Obviously we had the blue on there, but I just wanted to give it a little bit more. It doesn't really show up to here too much because of the light, but yeah, there's definitely more blue now at the top. It's starting to look like a fully formed card. I think at that point I realised I hadn't done anything with the actual little wand that the fairy was holding, so I just added a bit of yellow on that, which obviously ties in with the yellow flowers. So it's starting to kind of come together. She's floating at the moment in mid-air. We need to give her some ground to stand on, which, as I said, I'm going to do with some torn paper. And basically it's a case now of just embellishing. So we've got our main focal point, we've kind of got our middle of the card, we just need to work on the top and the bottom now. Now that stamp I've just brought in, you can see the love heart there on the right hand side, that is this hanging down. There's a set of 3, it's a trio, and I've also picked up some VersaFine clear ink as well. This is one of the inks that Lavinia do, which is really nice. and you can do fine stamping with them. So I'm going to add some hanging down elements in green and purple basically. So I've put the first one on my acrylic block. These ones I'm just going to do, again, quite relaxed, one stamp and a second for a paler kind of shadow effect. Just a mixture of those hanging down. And you can see I'm spacing them out. I'm not thinking too much about it. I'm not filling all the space. I kind of want them in a random element. There we go. So we've got our greens. There we go. So that fills that top space. And then similarly, I've got also a secondary, which is one of the hearts. I'm going to give it a second colour as well. Do this in purple, so that we've got a bit of variety at the top, kind of a green and a purple hanging down. Kind of creates that effect of being in a lovely glade somewhere. At this point I'm just grabbing and finding my purple, and there it is. So I can now stamp similarly some purple. It's useful to have a piece of paper underneath what you're doing as well, because you can always just stamp off and just check it's working okay before you commit to your actual main project panel. There we go. So there's some purples in amongst the greens. And you can look and see now that looks quite nice. It's hanging down at the top. It just gives a bit more interest to the top of the card. Pop that stamp away. As I said, these are very useful. I love Lavinia stamps. I have quite a lot of their stamps. Right, there we go. So that's our top done. And then similarly, I'm going to go in, I think, and darken that a little bit as well. So I go in now with the purple. We did, obviously, we darkened the blue. But now we've introduced another colour, which is the purple. That kind of echoes the colours within the flowers. So I'm just darkening that edge a little bit. And these Lavinia stencil brushes are also excellent as well. Really soft bristles and really easy to control. Look how much ink is on the paper compared with how much ink is on the card. It's very easy to control. There we go, so there's our top bit. And now we just need to do something with the bottom. So this is the point when I grab my green, and I'm just going to do some torn edges. Now you can kind of achieve quite a nice landscape effect. Lavinia do actually do a set of Rolling Hills acrylic masks, which are really great, and I have got them and I use them. But I decided in this instance to just actually do it with a piece of torn paper. So first of all, I'm loading my pen up, my stencil brush. And there you go, see, I'm just putting that torn edge down, and I'm just inking around it so that I get obviously a darker where the torn edge is. And then you see we get a lovely torn effect. You can then do that again, and then you end up creating layers, so it looks like kind of hills and valleys. You can flip the tier over, rip another tier obviously. The most important thing is just to make sure you ground the feet, because whilst fairies can fly, they don't look great when they're floating in midair. And you have to just look at where things are. I didn't actually spot at this point, but I did sort out later. There were a couple of flower stems on the right there. There's two that aren't on anything, and I didn't realise until later when I looked at the card after I finished the video that they were floating, so I did add one more little hill in place. And that's pretty much the main body of our card done, to be honest. We've got all our images. So now I'm getting into embellishing. So I'm using a product here. I don't use that often. They're called Stickles, and it is a liquid with a kind of glitter in it. So you can see I'm going over all the flowers. It comes out as a clear liquid, and the glitter is hanging within the liquid. And it's just a way of adding glitter in a kind of controlled fashion, because you can squeeze the bottle and it lets out as much as you want basically. So it's really easy to just go over all those flower heads, which is what I'm doing, and then it leaves a lovely glittery effect on them all. You can still see the colour underneath because the liquid is clear, but the glitter hangs in the suspension of the liquid and it leaves the glitter stuck on the flower heads. You could of course do this with glue and glitter if you wanted, but this is just for me a kind of quick and easy way of doing that. It certainly does enhance. There we go, so we've got our glittery flowers now, which you can just about see there as I hold the card up. So really the last stages now are to finish the card. So basically flip it over, obviously double-sided, and then we're going to lay it down on a panel of black and just introduce a black layer between the two. Obviously the fairy is black, so it ties in with her. Black border also really it does look good in card making because it kind of gives you a dark background that then pulls your focus into the middle. So I've done this with double-sided. You could as easily do it with glue. And then basically we're just going to lay that down on the black, get it into a corner, make sure it's kind of even. Then we'll trim that down and then stick that onto a card blank. This is a 7 by 5 inch card, so I'm just pressing that down because the glue is on the front and I haven't really let it dry. Quite a bit of the glue came off with the glitter, so I actually decided I'm going to go over the glue again, the flowers again with the glitter in the stickles. So I'm just going to trim that down, and typically that's one of the last things you do pretty much when the card is finished, but I kind of didn't allow it time. Hence I'm laying it down on that piece of scrap paper again, because I just know full well a whole load more of the glitter is going to come off because it was still drying. That's the only thing with products like stickles, they do take a while to dry, so you need to leave your card ideally overnight really. There we go, so that's our actual black matte layer. And then I'm just going to find a card blank. I think I went for a brown one here, yes. So this is a brown 7 by 5 card blank. I'm just going to obviously score that, make sure it's nicely square. And then we'll stick that front down. So I'm going to peel these off, bunny ears technique, and just position that, make sure we get it into the right place. And that's our card pretty much finished. It looks quite nice. Quite vibrant colours against that brown background, which is why I went with brown rather than white in this instance. And there's our card, so you can see it looks quite good. As I said, I do go over it again with the stickles just to give it another, there we go, you can see that. Just give it a little bit more because some came off when I was doing stuff. So we've stamped, we've masked with the masking fluid. Definitely a great product, Winsor & Newton. It's called Art Masking Fluid. You can get it online. You can get it from most places, actually, art supplies. The masking fluid, do what you want over the top of it, and then obviously just peel that away, and that keeps your underneath image nice and safe. As I say, don't forget to dry though if you've got wet ink before you start peeling off, otherwise you can get a smudge, which is what I did, and luckily I was able to rub it out. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. If you have, please give this video a thumbs up. Lots of other videos on my channel, including technique videos and full card making. So if you're interested and you like my style, please go and have a look at my other videos. Appreciate you subscribing, it helps my little channel grow. Hopefully you've enjoyed that, and I'll catch you next time when we do another card. I'll just do a little close up there so you can see the glitter. It really does sparkle. Looks quite nice. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.